Hi, good evening, everyone. Great to see so many people here. Paul just said, oh, great crowd. And I was like, oh, we always get these people. So, I mean, you are special, Paul, but also we do always get an incredible group of people that turn up. So thank you. And I think it's testament to how many there are in and around this area that feel disenchanted with politics, want to learn more, whether it be about foreign policy or the economy or how we tax the rich more. Yeah, what happened to the Labour Party? I was thinking about this introduction today, and I was just thinking, I think so many of us, well, I mean, maybe best describe, I was talking to someone in the Northeast yesterday, and she was just saying how many people she's talking to there that are like, I voted Labour my whole life and I'm not going to vote for them this time. And if you go door knocking, and many of us have, because we have incredible local candidates standing here as independents, or if you've been out for the Greens, just the constant thing from people, I don't know anymore because I always voted Labour and I'm so disappointed. Like, it's so rare to have someone that still like really actively wants to vote Labour. And I think it's actually quite an emotional thing. I was talking about it to this lady who is in an ex-mining village, and she was just saying, like, people are extra angry because it's like the level of betrayal for those of us that trusted this party for so long and had a political home and thought that was our home. And for many of us, went out for years, and certainly under Corbyn, and would, you know, spend our weekends and our free time, you know, giving our energies to the Labour Party. And now we just feel so far away. Many of us feel so far away from them. I was on Good Morning Britain last week and was on the news panel, so I listened throughout the show. So I had to listen to Zia Youssef, but also had to listen to the Labour minister that came on. And I just felt embarrassed by, I just couldn't connect what he was saying with the Labour Party I used to vote for. And he was talking about illegal immigrants coming on boats, and, you know, it's just so ugly, and defending Starmer and Mandelson, and, you know, it's just a quagmire of like corruption and this old boys network still of giving your friends a job. And, you know, Hannah Spencer also, you know, said a really important and relevant and kind of quite shocking point about the drinking that goes on in Parliament, subsidised by us. And instead of people being humbled by it and, you know, apologetic and like, actually, we're going to stop subsidising alcohol in Parliament, she got a pile-on from Labour MPs, and you could tell they were giving a memo because they were saying the same thing, basically having a go at her for saying, oh, you know, we work 14-hour days, we have such a hard time, and we want a drink is normal. I mean, they're so disconnected from normal people. Like, no one thinks you're having a hard time if you're an MP. But yeah, I mean, it's just shocking. And I think it happened so quickly, and it is worth thinking about how we got here in order for us to learn the lessons, to maybe see the signs and make sure that it doesn't happen again, or even to question whether the Labour Party can ever come back from that. I just got a message saying, again, that potentially a Labour MP might stand down for Andy Burnham, and there seems to be some people that are like really relying on that to sort of save the Labour Party, but we'll get into that today. So happy to have Paul Holden with us, who's an investigative journalist and has been for almost 2 decades now. He co-directs the Shadow World investigations that does all kinds of really interesting investigative work. I actually came across your work, Paul, when I was teaching at London School of Economics and looking at state capture and looking at the case of South Africa, where you did so much work that really actually highlighted how bad things were the ANC and the Guptas, and those of you that know the case. I mean, it basically, that work, alongside many others that were highlighting the levels of corruption, brought down that president and has quite rightly lowered the support for the ANC and put pressure on them to be better in that regard. So, I mean, this is an award-winning investigative journalist. And I say that to emphasize it because, of course, we know that one of the things that happened when Paul put out this book, or when the Labour Party got whispers of this book, was to try and undermine your credentials, the evidence, the incredible record you have on investigative journalists. So thank you so much for coming today. Let's start. Usually we stand up just so that everyone, because I feel like this hall slants like that way, and if we sit down, no one at the back can see. But yeah, just a reminder that Selassie gets upset if we step outside this way. Actually, thank you to Selassie, who always films these, by the way, and people watch them on YouTube. We're all powered by volunteers here. I just wondered, given that history of like investigating, tax fraud and corruption, and like what brought you to wanting to look at the Labour Party and what happened under Corbyn and Starmer?
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks everyone for coming tonight. It is a great turnout, by the way. To an extent, it was fortuitous and lucky. Basically, what happened was that in 2021, I lucked into this extraordinary leak of documents out of the Labour Party. And one of the things that I'd sort of specialised in South African work and then in my other investigative work is working with these very large data sets. You get these massive leaks of material. So the Gupta leaks, for example, which is like 200 gigabytes of emails. And you're trying to piece through forensically exactly how crimes happened. And I got this massive leak of documents out of the Labour Party. And to be honest, I was going through this material and I didn't think there was anything incredibly interesting in it to begin with, because one of the things that's striking about the Labour Party is how insanely boring it actually is behind the scenes. Anybody who's been involved in the Labour Party knows that the vast majority of documentation produced in the Labour Party is people complaining about each other, usually about imagined infractions. The chair didn't take my question in the right order, and standing order 3.2 has been violated, and when she asked me the question, she asked it softly, so I couldn't hear her properly, and therefore I couldn't answer properly, and that's a form of bullying. So this was just, I thought this is just noise and noise and noise. And
I'm looking at some of us that were in those meetings and remember all of that happening, yeah.
But then we found these documents, and I should say I was working at the time with my partner, Jess, who is herself like an incredible investigator, and she actually discovered this document in this trove, and it was about Morgan McSweeney and Labour Together, who it's sort of hard to think because they're such big figures in our political life now, but in 2021 when we discovered these people were totally unknown. If you looked up Morgan McSweeney, there's basically nothing about him online. He had his LinkedIn, one or two little articles, but basically nothing. And Labour Together, if you Googled them and you looked at their website and you looked at the stuff they've been produced, they seemed like the most incredibly boring think tank in the world. Just really anodyne, really bog standard, kumbaya, let's all get together, and solve factionalism in the Labour Party. But the documents we found didn't reflect that. It didn't reflect the public image. And what it showed at a very deep level was that this political project around Morgan McSweeney and Labour Together had an incredibly profound, almost entirely despicable impact on our politics, on our politics over the last decade, really, of political life. Because what those documents spoke to was an effectively entirely covert campaign, which was launched in 2017 by Morgan McSweeney using Labour Together with an undeclared pot of funding, £700,000, which they used to transform British politics. On the one hand, to undermine the leadership of Jeremy Corbyn entirely covertly, inflame the anti-Semitism crisis, and second of all, to incubate the leadership of Keir Starmer as a precondition for completely radically transforming the Labour Party. And, people ask me, is this a case of state capture? I don't think it quite meets the definition of state capture. But what I do feel like is it's a heist. And effectively what you had was a covert, at times unlawful project to effectively steal the Labour Party, to steal the Labour Party from its members, from its voters, from its organic base, from the trade union movement, and turn it into something that most of the public cannot stand, and which serves a very particular set of class interests in this country. So the long and short of it is that we found documents and we realized that actually there was a very dark and profound and ugly story. And as we found them, we realized these people were about to take power. These people were, going to assume these incredibly powerful positions. And there was this urgency. We just had to let people know. And unfortunately, we couldn't let people know, and partially because of what they did to me and my partner, Jess, which curtailed what we could do. But we realized that this is one of the darkest, most profound stories that I've investigated. And we just felt we had to get it out there.
Yeah, I mean, you've got this book here, and Paul's bought some copies. If you want to buy one today, I would definitely recommend it. The detail in which you provide and the story of like how this happened. Talk us through, before you get to your findings, how you made sense of the evidence and your process of bringing it together.
Sure. I mean, on the one hand, we used sort of specialized forensic techniques to interrogate this very large data set and just mining it for as much information as we could.
So was it like emails? Was it like sort of strategy documents that weren't really meant to be out there in the world? Or
it's about, it's a very significant leak of material. It's primarily emails, but then it's a combination of network drive folders and stuff like that, and policy documents. And to be honest, the story that we ended up telling around Labour Together was actually quite fragmentary, because it's only a small handful of documents that we discovered, but which sort of seeded a series of queries and questions for us to go and look and pull the string and then realize where everything came from. And the thing that was interesting about it was that for a long time, we kept on coming across these like pretty outrageous stories, and we tell some of these stories in the book, and they felt like these sort of disconnected incidents of skullduggery, of wrongdoing. And it took quite a long time for us to realize it was actually a single story, one story, which is effectively the story of the Labour Together project and the way it's remade this Labour Party. And we had all these incidents that were coming across, we'd see it in the files and be like, this is outrageous behavior. I give an example of, inside Croydon's having their emails criminally hacked and being distributed into the Labour Party to find out who their confidential whistleblowers are. Oh, who's been copied into it? It's Steve Reed, and Steve Reed's the director of Labour Together. Why are they getting these emails? Because this is a journalist who is reporting critically on them, and actually this is a pattern of their behaviour. So it took quite a while for us to get through the noise and then realise actually there's a narrative thread here. That narrative thread is a pretty small factional project that used very disturbing techniques to take over the Labour Party and turn them into what it is now.
So tell us about some of your headline findings, and interested in, I guess, because for some of us this might not be a surprise because we felt it at the time. But yeah, tell us some of your headline findings, and especially what you found surprising or shocking in what you found.
Well, I suppose the key story is to understand precisely where this government comes from. And its incubation is July 2017. And that date is incredibly important because July 2017 is a month after the June 2017 general election, where the Labour Party and Jeremy Corbyn does much better than expected and increases its vote share substantially, gets over 40% of the vote, which is only the third time the Labour Party has gotten over 40% since 1974, I think it is. And only the second time in the century. But for people like Morgan McSweeney and Steve Reed, the MP, who you might have been seeing is currently the Labour Party has chosen attack dog to go after the Greens, which I think is despicable considering his background. And a small handful of people around them, this was a disaster. This was an emergency because they genuinely, at a deep and fundamental level, despised the left wing of the Labour Party and despised the sort of anti-imperialist, socialist politics that Jeremy Corbyn represented. And for them, for a long period of time, after Jeremy Corbyn's elected in 2015, there is an internal narrative amongst the Labour right where their reading is that Jeremy Corbyn and the left is so utterly dysfunctional that when this project, the Jeremy Corbyn project, finally actually is put to the public in a general election, the public will be so appalled by it that the Labour Party will get 15-20% of the vote, and it'll fall apart, and then they can choose, David Miliband, whoever who's waiting in the wings of West Streeting to take over Labour Party. And instead, when the public actually gets the whiff of a socialist project or a social democratic project that seems authentic, it's incredibly popular. And which I think a lot of people, we've seen Ed Balls this morning after Zach Balansky. I think for a lot of them, this was a deep, actual, psychic and psychological wound for them, because part of their own identity was this idea that they're better than the left wing who they despise. But for people like Morgan McSweeney, June 2017 is the moment where Corbynism won't fail on its own terms. They have to defeat it. And Morgan McSweeney leaves a job in the local government association and joins Labour Together in July 2017. And in the month that he leaves the local government association and joins Labour Together, he convenes a meeting in Steve Reed's parliamentary office, and Steve Reed prints out this document, which is a strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threat analysis, a SWOT document. And it's effectively a strategy document for how to destroy the Labour Party from within as a precondition to taking it over. And it specifically lists what they want to do over a period of time in order to destroy Corbynism. And the thing that's really interesting about it is they actually explicitly list as one of the threats a Labour government, right? Which is a very profound thing for this political project. This is Labour MPs and Labour insiders who are saying, we don't want the Labour Party to win the next general election, because if it does, our political project, our faction, is totally out of the water. And what we have some sense of, I don't think we have nearly enough sense of it, and this is why I support these. There's been a number of calls for investigations into Labour Together. But one of the things that we know that they do is that they insert themselves into the anti-Semitism crisis that was impacting the Labour Party. Now, I should say, just to make it very clear, because lots of people misunderstand or misinterpret what I say about the anti-Semitism crisis. So let me just say very clearly that I take the same view on the anti-Semitism crisis as Martin Ford, which is that, yes, there was anti-Semitism in the Labour Party. There's types of anti-Semitism that express themselves on the left. But the problem is the issue of anti-Semitism in the Labour Party was snarled up in factionalism, which produced a whole series of perverse and perverted outcomes. Because on the left, people viewed every allegation of anti-Semitism as being made in bad faith. But on the right, there was a factional advantage to overstating or overemphasizing the extent of anti-Semitism and expanding the definition of what anti-Semitism is. Right? And part of what we discovered was that they really played, McSweeney in particular, McSweeney and Steve Reed and his colleague of theirs, Imran Ahmed, played a very profound role in covertly creating so many of the narratives of the anti-Semitism crisis. Now, that would be okay if it was happening, if what they were seeding was accurate. But then I went to go and look at what the allegations they were posting were, and they were inaccurate or overstated or alarmist, and also being seeded at the specific and explicit period of time where they're seeking to covertly destroy the Labour Party. This is extremely problematic for me. And I think one of the most disturbing aspects of this political project is the extent to which you had a covert political project with explicit factional agendas, which is effectively an anti-democratic project because it refuses to accept the outcomes of open democratic processes in the Labour Party, inserting itself into an anti-Semitism crisis and overstating or working with the media to place stories which don't stand up when you scrutinize them. And maybe I can give an example, and I'm speaking for a bit, but one of the things, one of the first McSweeney products is this article that appears in the Sunday Times. It's published in March 2018, and it's called Corbyn's Hate Factories. And what it was that McSweeney and his colleague, a guy called Imran Ahmed, who I've been investigating for a long time, had basically scoured through all these Facebook pages, these left-wing pro-Corbyn Facebook pages, and found, according to them, 2,000 incidents of bullying, misogyny, racism, anti-Semitism. And this was used to prove that actually there's an entire online ecosystem of Corbynites and Corbynism, which is suffused with hate. I mean, the hate factories is a very specific phrase. What it means is that there is an industrialized production of hate for a particular end. It's a very elusive phrase. But then you start looking at the evidence, right? Well, first 2,000 posts, that's a terrible, terrible number. But the person who, there's 14 different groups, some of the membership is 500,000. Across the period of time they're examining, there's millions and millions and millions and millions of posts, right? So this is a tiny, minuscule fraction of the actual posts that are appearing. And then you actually look at the posts. So one of the posts they say is anti-Semitic is somebody says, I fear, on this Facebook page, says, I fear that the Labour Party anti-Semitism crisis is being promoted and pushed by undisclosed Blairite actors, right? This is mad, and that's described as anti-Semitic, right? But it's literally true. This article proves that the statement is true, because there is actually an undeclared Blairite project using anti-Semitism to undermine the Labour Party. And what's more important is that the person who says that is Naomi Wimborne-Idrissi, who's Jewish. So this is the story. This is the nature of the sort of stuff that they get involved in. And then, of course, they incubate Starmer's leadership and produce, probably the most mendacious political campaign in history. And then from there, it's just, frankly, a nightmare horror show of reckless, lawless behavior to just take this party and squeeze the life out of it and disconnect it from its working class trade union base.
Just on that, I wonder, things like we heard locally about the use of anonymoter, and now it's all coming out. And what really strikes me is at the time there were so few people, like the media and the establishment were just going along with everything, and anyone that said anything was like classed as mad. And now it's like more and more obvious that we were so right, and people that were like saying about Starmer, and I was reading, even in your book, you talk about like his local party wrote a letter saying, please do not vote for this man. Like, he can't be trusted. If you're anywhere on the left, he is our MP, and he never votes to the left in our constituency votes. And but that kind of no one heard about that.
I mean, it's astonishing. It's one of the things that's quite interesting about this whole story is the story is really a story that's mediated through the media in two ways and in quite disturbing ways. On the one hand, part of this political project that I'm describing, one of the things that they identified, and one of the things they have and if you read what I've seen behind the scenes, is that this political faction hates accountability, like despises it. Sees accountability as a form of abuse. Really, it's quite astonishing. Like it's almost psychopathic.
I remember sending emails locally, and the emails that we would get back when we would try and hold anyone to account on anything.
That's bullying.
Yeah.
And what's very clear is that there is a persistent and consistent campaign to really destroy the livelihoods of journalists in particular, who are reporting accurately and critically on this political project. So one of the things that they're doing between 2019 and 2020 is running this genuinely disturbing, despicable campaign called Stop Funding Fake News, which undermines and demonetizes the Canary. And it's not, and they say the Canary is publishing misinformation and fake news, but actually what the Canary is doing is writing, genuinely speaking, factually accurate stories that are problematic for this political faction. Because what they're actually doing is in real time, they are busy fact-checking the nonsense stories that Labour Take is busy placing in the mainstream media. And I know you mentioned it before, but it definitely, it's a consistent theme that comes through this political project. I mean, they targeted Inside Croydon. For those who don't know the story, it's a very disturbing story, which there's a local news outlet called Inside Croydon, in Croydon, obviously, which has been reporting on like the deep and profound governance failures of the Labour government running Croydon, which had to declare bankruptcy on 3 different occasions, right? And one of the things I discovered in the files was the extent to which the Labour Party was trying to repeatedly expel the journalist who was exposing this wrongdoing, which they did literally say was abuse and bullying for him to write this council is collapsing. But the most disturbing thing is that in 2021, some unknown actor hacked inside Croydon, got all of their emails, and then they were immediately sent into the Labour Party bureaucracy, Steve Reed is copied into these emails. And instead of the Labour Party saying, whoa, you can't be handling the hacked, stolen emails of an independent, legitimate media outlet, they used the material to find out who inside Croydon's confidential sources are.
So dark.
It is so dark, and it is absolutely astonishing. And of course, then 2 or 3 years later, they hire an investigative firm to go after me and my family.
Yeah.
Right. So on the one hand, it's like a total hostility towards journalists who are accurately reporting on them. On the other hand, there is a total and complete failure of the mainstream media to scrutinize these people. And I'll give one good example, and then we move on to the next question. But one of the defining moments after Starmer is elected is when people realize that there's a freebie scandal around him, where he's taken more freebies than every Labour leader since including Tony Blair combined, in the 2 years after the pandemic is over. It's 2 years, he takes over £100,000 in freebies, right? And not just freebies from, kindly souls, but freebies from gambling companies, from horse racing companies, from millionaire donors. And it's a deep and profound governance failure, because effectively what he's doing is he's pre-conflicting himself before he comes into government. Now, this stuff is not secret. It's really not secret. Anyone can find this. Google, Register of Members' Interests, Keir Starmer. And in 2024, during that election campaign, I was screaming at journalists. I was calling them up and being like, you have to report on these freebies. It's not appropriate for voters not to know about this, because throughout that campaign, what was happening was that Keir Starmer was saying in response to Rishi Sunak, I'm going to make this a government of service. I'm going to serve in the interests of people. And I was screaming at the TV, saying like, well, really? You've taken £100,000 in freebies? Gratuities? You've conflicted yourself already. And this is the astonishing thing. The first time a mainstream media outlet reported on those freebies was the 3rd of July. That is the day before the vote. The Financial Times asked Starmer for the first time. It's the first time he's ever asked about his freebies by a mainstream media outlet. And of course, what that means is as soon as the Labour government's elected, and then it becomes useful for the media to report on this, for whatever reason, go after Sue Gray, suddenly people find out, oh, actually, hold on a second. This guy is not who we thought he was. This is a very different image to what we expected, which actually then drives like a deep and profound abiding distrust in our politicians. It's actually a godsend for the far right, this sort of stuff.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that point in your title, that this is a crisis for the British democracy.
Yeah.
And this is what you also hear constantly on the doorstep. Like, I just don't like anyone anymore. I mean, this is one of the benefits of running as an independent as well. But I just wondered if you could say a bit about why, like, Morgan McSweeney, and wider than that, I guess what's behind them, driving them, but also, like, why did they want power so badly? What is their vision for this country? And, like, whose interests do they represent?
I mean, I think that's actually a very difficult question to answer, because it's actually not always entirely clear. Because what does seem to be clear is that they don't necessarily have a vision for the country. They don't have a very profound or deep underlying ideology or progressive vision. I mean, I think it's interesting about this political project is that there's no tangible sense, beyond a couple of rhetorical flourishes, that the people who are involved in it are excited by the prospect of having power to make people's lives better. I think they're quite excited about power for its own sake. I think Starmer personally is motivated by status. I think that's the thing that really motivates him, the status and ambition. And I think one of the most powerful driving forces behind this project is not an ideology to make people's lives better, but it's effectively, this is a very substantive, quite disturbing patronage network. That this is I think what even when I was writing the book, and it's something I'm only quite getting to grips now, is the extent to which the brief period between 2015 and 2019 disrupted this extremely well-developed, lucrative ecosystem where there's this massive revolving door between the Labour Party and lobbying firms and private interests. And, under the Corbyn regime, there was no space for that sort of thing because the leadership and the membership weren't interested in the sort of lobbying politics that is now, the mode of the Labour right. And what's really striking me is, we've been doing an exercise recently of just tracking the revolving door between the Labour Party and lobbyists. So I'll give you a good example. I remember the day of the election, and by the way, I should shout out, there's an absolutely incredible journalist called Shaheen, who's probably the best journalist in the country, writes for Open Democracy, who's been exploring this particular revolving door. But there was, on the day of the election, there was basically an open competition between 3 different lobbying firms about who had the most number of potential Labour MPs working for them. And one of them celebrated, we've got 6 potential Labour MPs been working for this lobbying firm for the last year. Sign up with us, you'll get access. And part of what this political project was returning this party back into a machine where quite mediocre people can make a lot of money.
Right.
Mediocre people with not a huge number of skills to sell besides for political access. And it is astonishing the extent to which the bureaucrats who have been following behind the scenes, who've been stitching things up between 2020 and 2024, almost immediately after the election, go form their own consultancy firms or go work for consultancy firms and effectively trade on this political access.
Yeah.
So I think it's as much about ambition and status as it is about returning quite a small number of people, Labour Party back into a vehicle for 5,000-10,000 people who would otherwise not be employable into a system where they can be rewarded for their loyalty and for their actions before they came into government, and which they can trade their influence, and which these MPs will probably see in the future some way of making their own money as they leave power.
I mean, just on that, just thinking about just one of these consultancy firms, which I've come across in the tax justice world, who was given an inordinate amount of money from a funder interested in funding organisations working on increasing wealth taxation. And lo and behold, this consultancy tells them, oh, there's no chance of getting wealth taxation. Like, you actually doesn't make sense to put money into this. And I just thought, and there was a whole meeting, and I just was like, literally, you can look at who runs this organisation, you can look at the people within it, you can see that exact revolving door. And so when they come back to you and say, we've got all these high level contacts, and they're saying there's no point, also it's just a self-fulfilling, but also they have more influence, even though they actually know nothing. The level of mediocrity is surprising, because they get paid so much more than us in the non-profit sector. But yeah, they're having huge influence across, not just in government, but outside government. And what policies are then and organisations are funded. So this, I've seen that in my own little part of the progressive movement. I just want to come back to this point about how you and your partner were targeted, and one to say, sorry, it's despicable. Unfortunately, unsurprising. But I think one of the things that is really good is you ended up exposing them, and people like Josh Simons, I met him on Politics Live, nasty. This is before it all came out. He was defending the Tommy Robinson march. It was just after that. Honestly, it was just a horrible. I was like, how are you Labour? And he was so arrogant. And he's the one at Labour Together that commissioned this investigation into you. And I just wondered if you wanted to say something about, I guess, what happened, but also what their efforts to undermine you and undermine the book tells you about what they're scared of.
Sure. So it's a bit of a long story, but I'll try to keep it relatively brief. I mean, effectively what happened was that one of the key stories that I tell in the book, and I think it's one of the most profound stories I tell in the book, is about money. It's always about money. But between 2017 and 2020, as Morgan McSweeney is inflaming the anti-Semitism crisis, attacking Jeremy Corbyn, and also incubating Keir Starmer's leadership, which he's doing from July 2019, he's doing with this enormous pot of money that he is not declaring. Now, this is, Labour Together takes in 830,000 odd pounds between 2017 and 2020, almost all of which is donated from two sources. One is a guy called Martin Taylor, who's a millionaire hedge fund owner with interest in private healthcare. And the second primary donor is a guy called Sir Trevor Chin, who, in his own words, has spent his entire life working for Israel. And last year, end of 2024, was awarded the Israeli Presidential Medal of Honor for services rendered to Israel and humanity, I should say. And the person who awarded him that prize was President Isaac Herzog, who of course has been cited in the International Court of Justice decision in January 2024 as making plausibly genocidal statements. He was the one who said there's no innocence in Gaza. They're all involved. Which of course is one of the darker aspects of this political project, is that it creates the context in which the Labour Party responds so horrifically to Gaza. But of the £800,000 that's being donated by millionaire and pro-Israel donors, £730,000 is not declared to the Electoral Commission in violation of the law. Now, it's absolutely clear that has to be declared, right? And it's an offence not to declare it under the law. And Labour Together were investigated by the Electoral Commission in 2021. They were found guilty of it, given a slap on the wrist. It's a very small fine. And one of the things that we found in the documents, Labour Together said this is just a human error, administrative oversight. And the documents that we had suggested something quite different, because what they showed very quickly is that Labour Together, Morgan McSweeney knew in the period between 2018 and 2020 that he had to report donations. And I know this because I got a Freedom of Information request out of the Electoral Commission showing that Morgan McSweeney called the Electoral Commission in 2017 and said, I don't want to report donations. And the Electoral Commission wrote back to him and said, you have to report donations. And then spent a number of months explaining to him how to report donations, and he was engaging with him. So it's absolutely clear that he knew he had to report donations. It's also true that he was repeatedly telling everyone that he was reporting donations. He was telling MPs in Parliament, and the Labour Together website was saying that. In February 2020, Shabana Mahmood writes an article for Labour List on behalf of Labour Together, where she says multiple different things that are not true, including which is, we are a members association, we are reporting our donations, which is not true, right? So you have an organisation that knows they have to report donations, is telling people they are reporting donations, but they're not. And the second thing is that it looks like when they're put under investigation by the Electoral Commission, they may not be entirely candid in their responses. So I take this to the Sunday Times in November 2023, and I say, this is serious stuff. At this point in time, it's very clear that the Labour Party is going to win the next election. Morgan McSweeney is going to be extremely powerful in the next administration. And the Sunday Times writes an article about the money. It's not quite, doesn't quite pull the trigger as I'd hoped. But at the bottom it says, this story was assisted by Paul Holden, who provided us documents from the Electoral Commission. Now, unbeknownst to me at the time, I should also say at the same time, I'm writing articles for Matt Taibbi in the States about some of these secret projects that Labour Together is running. And unbeknownst to me at the time, Labour Together's response is not to reflect internally about, well, maybe there's some truth to this and we should get to the bottom of it. Instead, Labour Together's response is to hire a reputation management firm called APCO Worldwide. And we've now seen the contract between APCO Worldwide and Labour Together. Josh Simons has repeatedly said, I hired this firm to investigate whether our materials were subject to a hack. But we've seen the contract. The contract literally says, APCO will put together a package of materials that will proactively undermine my reporting. And to make this very clear, in my mind, I read that as to proactively undermine my legitimate, factually accurate public interest reporting. Now, how do you undermine something that's factually accurate?
Personal, yeah.
Right? You basically go after somebody's reputation. You try and cast aspersions on them. And what we now know, and I'm not going to repeat the libels because they are absurd and disgusting and insulting, but over a period of 3 months, they investigated me and my family. They found out where I lived. And I've seen the final report they produced. It lists my home address right in the middle. It's an astonishing thing to see. Because what people don't understand is because of my work in South Africa, I left South Africa for a reason. Me and Andrew Feinstein left South Africa for a reason. I've been the subject to targets of burglaries, harassment, and death threats because of my work. I make sure I have a private life where people don't know who my partner is and don't know where I live because I don't want bad actors knowing that. So for me to see my home address listed as part of a private investigation was extremely triggering for me. Right? Identified my partner, they listed her by name. Then they identified that my partner's father is Andrew Murray, who's sitting over there, who they then falsely accused of being connected to Russia. They falsely accused me of being connected to Russia. And I've seen the final reports, they are despicable. And they don't just develop these reports, they distribute them. Because one of the things they do in January 2024, is they report to the security services. Josh Simons and Labour together write to what's called the National Cybersecurity Centre, which is part of GCHQ, and they try to prompt me to be investigated by the security services, saying that I'm part of a network of pro-Kremlin actors. And they attach this report, this despicable report, try to catalyze an investigation. And it was a very distressing time because actually at the same time as they're submitting their report, it's being briefed into The Guardian that I'm being under investigation. So I get an email from Pippa Cray, who's the deputy political editor, saying, we're about to run a story saying you're under investigation by GCHQ and CSC, which is devastating. If you work in the civil society sector, right, and you are living hand to mouth in philanthropic funding, the idea there's going to be a Guardian article that says you're being investigated for being the recipient of a Russian state hack, your funding evaporates. Your livelihood is over.
Well, that's the aim, isn't it? That's what they're trying to do.
What they did do was make sure that I couldn't take that story any further, because by February 2024, it was absolutely clear to me, my name had been mentioned in relation to Morgan McSweeney and Labour together twice in the mainstream media in the UK, and this was the response. I knew at that stage that basically it was no longer safe for me to report this material until I could get my act together. And I was very lucky because I was approached by this journalist called Khadija Sharif, this phenomenal investigative journalist I knew from South Africa, who'd been investigating APCO, who'd been investigating all these private intelligence firms that they subcontract to. And she called me and said, your name has come up. And I was
Otherwise
like,
you wouldn't have known.
I wouldn't have known. I had
you
no
wouldn't
idea.
have the evidence. You might have thought they were, but...
I had no idea for most of the time I was writing the book this was happening. I had some inkling that they were trying something, but nothing like this.
I mean, what does it say to you? Is it just the obvious? It's all true, obviously, and they're just scared of people knowing about what they've been up to?
I think it speaks to two things. One is that my reporting is accurate, and my reporting is scary because it's accurate. The thing that's very interesting is in Josh Simon's email to the National Cybersecurity Centre. He basically says, we are concerned this is going to affect the reputation of Morgan McSweeney and Keir Starmer and lead up to an election. Right? Because this is my reporting has to be accurate. It has to be rigorous, because if it's not rigorous and it's not accurate, I get sued. I lose my income. I get sued for libel. There is a certain level of discipline that you have to. I mean, also I've worked with the Sunday Times, the Telegraph, outlets in the States who run an editorial process to make sure everything is accurate. This is checked 1 million times before it's published, right? And what it speaks to is that we're onto something, because I'm utterly convinced of this money that wasn't declared. That on the balance of probability, if you put Morgan McSweeney in front of a jury and you put the facts that I have at my disposal in front of a jury, I think Morgan McSweeney's in trouble.
It's so deep and so dark. I just wonder, we usually have a break around this time, but I just wanted to ask, this is obviously much more than about Keir Starmer or Morgan McSweeney as individuals. Or is it? I mean, is Morgan McSweeney's gone, potentially Keir Starmer goes. Does that solve this?
No. I think what people fail to understand, which has not been properly reported, is that the Labour Party is genuinely, fundamentally transformed root and branch between 2020 and 2024. And they're explicit about it. It's being briefed from 2023 onwards. And this is a unique opportunity in Labour Party history to change the DNA of a Labour Party. And they do it. They do it. This is a unique opportunity for them, because one of the consequences of the 2019 election is that the Labour Party only elects, only has 200 MPs. By the time 2024 comes around, it's anticipated there's going to be 400 MPs, which is what they get. This is a unique opportunity for Morgan McSweeney and his allies. And it should be said, one of those allies who now seems to be involved in this process is actually Peter Mandelson himself.
Yeah. Mm.
Who is sitting there deciding who can and can't be a Labour MP. Now, this is an astonishing thing. Not just because Peter Mandelson's a disgusting, horrid human being who's friends with the world's most notorious nonce. It's also because he's running global counsel. He owns a lobbying firm representing some of the worst companies on the planet. And this guy is choosing who can be our Labour MPs.
Not me.
No, absolutely. And the thing that's interesting about that, I have to make this point, is that I've seen, I'm sorry to say this, but I've seen the due diligence they did on you. And let me just tell you, they put way more due diligence, way more effort into digging up nonsense dirt on you than they did on Peter Mandelson. I mean, if they applied the same level of rigor as they did to vetting left-wing candidates for nonsense allegations, like somebody who'd just like to tweet from Nicola Sturgeon saying, I've recovered from COVID, and on that basis they can't stand as a Labour MP.
So ridiculous.
If they'd done that to Peter Mandelson, he wouldn't have been appointed.
Yeah.
Right? But what we have now, and actually we've now been crunching the numbers, and I'll give you a preview, is that the thing that's very interesting is that in the end, Morgan McSweeney and his allies get to choose 260 of the current intake of Labour MPs, right? Now, why are they being chosen? Are they being chosen because they're brilliant minds? Because they have a progressive vision?
I was on a WhatsApp group with them and no.
No. It's loyalty. It's loyalty. And this is the problem. McSweeney can go, but this is McSweeney's party. He's changed it fundamentally in his image. The bureaucracy has been changed. So the General Secretary is one of his closest acolytes. Throughout the bureaucracy, at every local level, it's dominated by their allies. The Parliamentary Labour Party is stacked with people they handpick. So it doesn't matter. Obviously Andy Burnham's going to be better than this lot. But Andy Burnham's going to come in and he's going to face 260 MPs who have been picked by Peter Mandelson and Morgan McSweeney and Labour to win, and these people around them. And we've seen the results. We've actually, my partner Jess has been crunching the numbers, and she's done this incredible analysis basically of let's compare the voting patterns of the new intake versus the old intake. So it's comparing, not particularly left-wing Labour MPs like Emily Thornberry compared to this new intake, and she's developed this loyalty score, which is brilliant. And basically what it shows is that on key votes like jury trials, Palestine Action, cutting disability, the 260 MPs that were handpicked by Morgan McSweeney are utterly loyal to the government. And they are the ones who are uniquely pushing through the stuff. So what we have at the moment, right all together, is a political project that starts in 2017 with an undeclared pot of money, involves itself in the anti-Semitism crisis, chooses Keir Starmer as leader, fundamentally remakes the Labour Party, chooses the MPs with Peter Mandelson, the end result of which is they're taking away our civil liberties. That's the story of the last decade of the Labour Party. That's not changed by a new leader. It's certainly not changed at any speed.
Usually we have this break right now and we have tea and biscuits, but because we are during a local election period, we're not allowed to give you any tea and biscuits because it can be seen as a bribe. So usually we have this usually, whatever it may be, foreign policy or economics, quite depressing conversation. And then I'm like, go and chat to each other, have some biscuits. And then everyone's like cheered up a bit. But I don't even have that for you today. We are going to take a break because, you know, you guys should buy Paul's book, but also, you know, still please talk to each other. As you know, this is a community event. This is built from years of being together, standing together against some of what we're hearing, right? Feeling the end point of that at this local level and not seeing democracy as it should have been. And we still have the consequence of that. I guess what I want to ask Paul before we have a short break is, you know, I listen to you and I just think, how are we meant to trust anything or anyone? You know, it's so insidious. It's so, you just don't know what's going on in the background. And these people are so powerful and able, like you say, like insert themselves. I mean, where do you see, you know, any hope or any way through this?
Well, I mean, I think. Sorry.
Is it gone? Yeah.
It's interesting because when I gave my book to my partner's mother, who's a professor of behavioral studies, and she said at the end of the book, she says, "Your book is very depressing." You need to have a call to arms then. I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm not the call to arms kind of guy. If you want that, you bring Andrew Feinstein. He does the call to arms. He'll talk about working with Mandela. But I do think there's hope, because the thing that's interesting about this project is how vulnerable it is. It's not based in anything beyond, you know, the only skill that somebody like Morgan McSweeney has is an extraordinary ability to manipulate media narratives without anybody knowing. It's really quite astonishing. I was looking at, you Google this when you get home if you are similarly nerdy like me, which all of you plainly are, because you are on a Monday night talking politics. If you Google Cabinet Office Special Advisor disclosures, all special advisors in number 10 have to disclose all the hospitality they've gotten, all gratuities, and all meetings they've had with the media. And it's really fascinating because for a brief period of time when Morgan McSweeney is in number 10, he has to disclose that stuff. And it's astonishing because Morgan McSweeney is meeting with the editors of all the major newspapers in this country more often and more regularly than the Labour Party number 10's deputy head of communications or head of communications, right? Seeding these narratives. And the reason I tell that story is because it's flimsy. It's not based in anything. It's not rooted in a community. It's not rooted in a constituency, which is precisely why this political project is failing so rapidly. Because it isn't based on anything besides, when excuse my language, bullshit. And people have very rapidly seen through it. And that is difficult and problematic because one of the beneficiaries could be the far right. But this is a very unique moment in British political history where suddenly the cartel politics of the Labour Party and the Tory Party is collapsing. And in that moment, there's scary stuff. You see the rise of Rupert Lowe and people like that. But there's also this energy. There is a left-wing politics. The thing that's astonishing to me is, like, you read the mainstream media in this country and anybody, it almost like they pretend like the left wing doesn't exist, but actually there's a huge number of left-wing supporters in this country. Yeah. There's a huge number of people who are sympathetic to it, who the moment they are given a channel and a voice, move, and they collaborate and they activate and they make a change. And I feel like this is the one moment, maybe in my lifetime, it's scary and it's difficult and things are falling apart, but in that moment, new things can emerge, and that's exciting for me.
And there's a moment for that, which is next week, local elections on Thursday. Yay. And whether you're in Redbridge or Waltham Forest, actually next Friday, it can look very different here and across London. And Labour Party may well get their very strong message, unfortunately, they will get it from Reform as well on the right, but also from the left, that we are no longer voting for them blindly, that we won't put up with this corruption and scandal and as someone said it to me on a doorstep, we want one thing and they do the opposite, right? We're just fed up of it. And I do want to say this because we love to have these events and we love to see you here, but it's really important that politics isn't just about these discussions and it's actively getting involved. And we do need your help. And we have local independent candidates running here in Churchfields and in South Chingford in 2 wards. And the Greens have stood down for us. They haven't done that in other parts of Woodford Forest or Redbridge because we have that relationship and we're trying to do politics differently. And we need your support in getting out some final leaflets, and just the candidates in the room, if you want to stand up. These are such brave, amazing people that have been out. This is... Yeah. If you want a sticker. And this is a possibility of, like, I'm so excited about being at the count next Friday, even after all of the trauma of being in the past. Yeah, so please do go and speak to people at the back if you can, if you live around here and could deliver some leaflets for us, that would be incredible. We've got to get the vote out next Thursday as well. So if you're around, if you can take the day off, if you can give us an evening, we really need your support, please. Again, do sign up at the back. We'll have a quick, because we don't have any biscuits. We will have, let's take a pause till 22 and then we'll have half an hour of Q&A. So do think about what you want to ask. And thank you again to Paul. Let's reconvene in 10 minutes.
This is quite a hard meeting for a lot of us to listen to, because we went through the situation with Faiza, and also I think I've got PTSD from it, really, and quite how disgusting some of these people are. And to sort of see it laid out in the way Paul has is, it's terrible. But anyways, the good news is that we've got, as Faiza said, independent candidates standing here who, we've made an arrangement with the Greens locally where we're supporting them in South Woodford Ward, which is over the other side of the North Circular, and they are supporting us. Monica's a candidate. Stand up, Monica. Oh, and Paul, he's a greenie as well. In fact, the greenies can stand up. There's another greenie in here. Those are greenie candidates. Ooh.
Candidates, stand up. Woo!
And the thing is that, I think that the scale of what we've got in front of us has sort of been laid out by Paul. So it's good that people are grown-ups and work together. But on that note, as Faiza said, we have... we practically need you to help us get elected because it will make a difference. Especially, I'm not saying especially over here in Churchfields just because I'm standing and I want you to come and help me, but because Redbridge Labour Council is a hotbed of Labour together and Labour to win. And we, with Jazz Athwell, that well-known rogue landlord, and what we would like to do is make them Labour to lose, actually. So
Wes Street, and I don't know if you've seen, he's been out in Redbridge saying he's really giving it Islamophobia comments about independence. It's really ugly, and it's so important that they get this message that we reject all of it.
Yeah. So just as final appeal, we've got the sign-up sheets to help us get out the vote. In Chingford, they really, really need people to help them with the canvassing. So Norma, if you could wave your hand in the air. If you can help Norma, and Matt here will get details for canvassing in Chingford. You can sign up through our website, cwgindependence.com, is it? I think. I should know this stuff. And then also obviously helps on election day, but we really do need you to step up and help us. And hopefully at next month's in conversation, those elected people. Great. You have to be treating me better and not expecting me to make
Can't say treat.
Central Independence Rihanna here is on her own and waiting.
And it is it is amazing that even after everything they've done, they can't keep us down. Like, do you know what I mean? I just find it like incredible. And you're right, Paul, that their project is completely collapsing. So let's take some questions from the audience, because I know I can keep talking. Okay, let's do these 3 in a row here. Then Helen, thank you, and then we'll move to that side. Yeah.
I should make notes of the questions, otherwise I forget them.
Yeah, I'll do notes.
Okay, Paul, you were put under pressure not to write the book. Was your publisher put under pressure?
Pass it behind. Who was it? Simon? Yeah.
Hello, thanks for your book, which is a really great achievement. And a couple of things I'd like to ask. One is about Newham, not so far from here. You've written about that in your book. Could you just say a bit about what was going on there at the time? And also, you explained how Labour Together was working in the way that they wanted with many media groups. One thing in your book, which I found mind-boggling, was about the Equality and Human Rights Commission and who they are and what they do, because it sounds nice, equality and human rights, but you know, what sort of organisation is that? Seems to be controlled by the government, and does it do anything useful in the way of equality and human rights? Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's my question, where it's sort of a part of the comment question, is on lines with that. It's about the establishment, really. Just after Corbyn got elected, I saw Yanis Varoufakis talking about his experience in Greece and what happened to Syriza. And he said, well, expect the whole establishment to come down and undermine you, the media and so on. So your book's brilliant. I loved it, and it's like a therapy session for me. But it articulated what a small group of people done, but they had a much wider thing to tap into. And I wonder if you'd want to say something about that.
Questions. So wasn't publisher put under pressure? I mean, we did get a very vague letter from Labour Together saying, we put you on notice that you need to put allegations to us, but nothing beyond that. And part of the reason why is that actually it was very difficult to find a publisher in the UK. I went around in 2022 to different publishers trying to find somebody who would publish it, and nobody would touch it. And part of that is because it is very, very difficult in the UK, almost uniquely difficult to publish investigative books in particular, especially when you're going after powerful people, because the risks are so high for libel litigation, for lawfare, and it is something that we're very alive to because we've faced lawfare before. So part of me going to so the publishers of all books who've been great, and I recommend you go and look at the rest of the catalogue, which is very good. Publish people like Norman Finkelstein and others. And one of the reasons we went with OR is because they're based in the States. And I always had it in the back of my mind, one of the things that we had to manage, which is very weird, I've never had this with a book before like this, is that basically because we knew that this stuff was happening behind the scenes and investigating us and that we'd really caught their attention, we sort of had to smuggle the book into the public domain. It was very weird. It was quite difficult. And our backup was always, with the things we were terrified of being sued for libel, we were terrified of frivolous litigation, terrified of being reported to the police, or, and one thing I don't write about in the book, one thing that's very disturbing to me is that the Labour Party got a copy of my book before it was published.
How?
I don't know. A very small number of people had that book. And somehow the Labour Party got hold of it before it was published, and that's the sort of thing I was scared of. And so we went with all because we had in the back of our mind that, at the very least we could get it out in the States, because you can't really injunct a book in the States. You can't really sue people for libel in the States. So that's why we went with or, and we always had in the back of our mind, if worst comes to worst, we'll publish it in the US, we'll smuggle it into the UK and get it out there somehow. So they were relatively immune to pressure. There was a huge amount of pressure on you know, what they did between 2023 and when we discovered it, did have all sorts of quite difficult impacts on how we got the book out in a practical way, because we couldn't send the book out for review, right? If you're worried about being injuncted, you're worried about being leaked, you can't send it to the papers because, first of all, half the papers are people who've been working with Morgan McSweeney anyway.
Yeah.
Right. So how are you gonna get them to actually abide by an NDA agreement? So we had to be very strategic, and it was one of the weirdest, most bizarre experiences of my life getting the book out there, effectively having to leak stories beforehand. It was incredible. I'll tell you a story, but maybe it's a bit inside baseball, but you know, one of the things I realized is that I had to get one or two big stories out before the book came out as a form of protection. If I thought to myself, if I get one or two stories out in the public domain and they come after me with the nonsense I know they've been researching, at least I can say, well, of course they're doing this because look at what I have. Which is why one of the stories I went with first was about Paul Holden, who, if you don't know, what I had these messages where Paul Holden was making these absolutely despicable comments about Diane Abbott using this Labour Party internal email system, which then forced him to resign, and he was the chief of strategy at Number 10.
That as well, they got before the they knew some of that before the election. It only happened afterwards, no?
Yeah, I mean, the thing that's interesting there is that Paul Holden is a character who came up in the leaked report. And I tell the story about the leaked report. The leaked report was an opportunity for the Labour Party to go investigate, dig into its servers, and they totally ignored that. They treated Martin Ford terribly, and they didn't investigate that stuff properly. But what it did do was that by getting the Overton story out there, it at least sent the message that there's material here. But I had to be very careful. I remember, you know, I was working with all these different journalists, and I literally wouldn't give a single one of them a copy of the book. I was printing out little extracts of the book to give to them to publish, and I was like, you cannot see the rest of the book. You cannot see the rest of this chapter because I don't trust anyone for it not to be injuncted. So we were able to smuggle it into the public domain, and luckily it's done relatively well, which is good. Newham. Newham is an incredibly disturbing story.
I'm looking at my sister because she lives there.
Yeah. I would think it's one of the most disturbing things that I encountered in the book. It really is very, very, very messed up. Basically what happened was that this is 2021. Newham is the sort of place that is almost like a microcosm of how messed up the Labour Party actually is, because under Jeremy Corbyn, Newham there's a huge swell of new members who join. You know, Newham leans very left. The membership is very left-wing. The membership is in particular very responsive to like an anti-imperialist message, a pro-Palestine message. And this is a disaster for the Labour right wing in Newham and the party as a whole, because that threatens their positions of power and influence. And there's this incredible story where both the constituency parties in Newham were suspended, East Ham and West Ham CLP, in 2021. And the statement was put out in the media saying, well, we've heard, you know, we've received these reports of irregularities in Newham, which are so severe we have to suspend these constituency Labour parties. They're still suspended. Now, what that means, but practically speaking, in a borough like, you know, in a place like Newham, where for most of the politics of those two constituencies is through the Labour Party. To suspend those constituency Labour parties is effectively to suspend local democracy. What it means practically is that people in Newham can't choose their representatives through the Labour Party. They can't choose their MPs. They can't choose their councillors. Instead, those are people chosen by head office in the Labour Party. And actually what we see, you know, in 2024 is one of the representatives, I think it's West Ham, it might be East Ham, is James Asser, who's on the NEC and is parachuted in by his NEC colleagues when the election is called.
They did that for each other everywhere.
Exactly. I mean, like Luke Akers, for example, gets parachuted in from the NEC. Now, what are those irregularities? What is actually underlying that story? And what underlined that story was that there was a local person who submitted this absolutely astonishingly mad dossier into the Labour Party. alleging widespread irregularities in Newham. And it's this absolutely insane, crazy document, where amongst other things, they're trying to find like any dirt that could be used to basically shut down these constituency Labour parties. They were monitoring local councillors. They're trying to prove that local councillors didn't live where they lived or they were registered in the wrong ward. They were literally surveilling Muslim councillors. There's a Muslim councillor, it lists their license plate number in this document. It says, this car's been parked here on this and this and this date. Finds out one of the councillors, they find out where he takes his children to school. And they say, this is where the school is. And the most astonishing thing is that somehow this person got access to the entire membership list of, I think it's East Ham CLP, all the names of the people on this list. And this person then takes all of these names and says, okay, I'm going to do an analysis of this intake of, there's lots of new members joining, let's have a look at this intake. And he uses the names to racially profile the constituency. I mean, it's astonishing. Literally, on the basis of this person's name, I suspect they're Bengali or Muslim. On the basis of this name, I expect they're white. On the basis of this name, I think they're Sikh. And there are diagrams in this document, literally line graphs of, here's a green line for Bengali and Muslim. And he makes the argument that this line is too big. Therefore, there must be an irregularity here. I mean, it's an astonishing document. Now, this is a document that should immediately...
Irregularity, what do they mean? That there's too many of...
That there must be some family capturing, it's irregular to sign people up and they're unwaged. There must be somebody who's forcing them to join, which is really just like another version of this is big man politics. It's like when the same way that when Streeting goes around and he says, we're fighting sectarian politics, but you know what he actually means, right? Now... For me, this document is one of the worst things that I saw, like really just an incredible document. And the Labour Party, when they received this document, should have been like, what on earth has happened here? Let's go to the ICO, let's go to the police, let's fess up, let's get hold of these councillors and say to them, by the way, I'm really sorry, but you've been surveilled. But they don't. In the same way with Inside Croydon, when they get their criminal emails, they find out the confidential sources. They use this to shut down CLPs, which are still shut down. I mean, that's why I say in the book that one of the impacts of the Labour Together project is that it's actually a deeply racist project, a deeply fundamentally Islamophobic racist project that has made the Labour Party an incredibly uncomfortable and unpleasant place for all sorts of different ethnic minorities, including, I should say, anti-Zionist Jewish people, where the party is hostile to them in many ways. Which brings me to the question about the EHRC. Now, I must just say, the EHRC is a topic that I could talk about at extraordinary length, which I won't tonight because it'll be very boring. But for those who don't know, the Equalities and Human Rights Commission is set up as part of the Equalities Act. Now, what it's supposed to do, it's this government organisation that's supposed to ensure the Equalities Act is being implemented, right? But there's some problems with the EHRC. The problem with the EHRC is that it's the way it's governed is that effectively it's a board of commissioners who run it. But who appoints the commissioners? The commissioners are all appointed by the minister, usually for Minister for Women's Inequality. And under the Tories, they got to choose for a decade and a half all the commissioners, who all happen to have interesting views on a whole range of different topics. One of whom was a guy called Alistair Henderson, who was the lead commissioner who was investigating the Labour Party. And The Guardian discovered that he'd been posting and sharing all sorts of incredibly problematic stuff on Twitter while he was a commissioner, expressing some pretty robust views.
About what? Like racist or?
Very, very, very concerned. You can Google this article and you can read it. And I make the argument, that this is a totally dysfunctional organisation. And in this particular regard, they do this investigation to the Labour Party, which I critique heavily because it's filled with basic fundamental flaws and errors in ways that are quite embarrassing, right? Like really, really simple basic flaws. I'll give you one example, then I'll stop talking about this, I promise. But there's when you'll be seeing recently Steve Reedy's been saying, the evidence that the Labour Party, it's such a weird thing by the way. It's one of these weird things about our current politics, is on the one hand, you have the Labour Party saying, their public messaging is, don't you know our party used to be so insanely racist and anti-Semitic? And Zach Polanski saying, well, actually, maybe you weren't so anti-Semitic. It's a bit of an odd dynamic. But the thing that comes through from one of the things that they find is that the Labour Party is guilty of harassment. Now, this is a particular legal term. What it means is that an agent of the party has harassed a community by making statements that are offensive or anti-Semitic. And one of the people they discover, and they only ever find 2 people, right? So for a party supposed to be filled with rabid anti-Semites, they could only find 2 people who made allegedly anti-Semitic statements. One of the people was a woman by the name of Pam Bromley, and it lists in the report, it lists all of the statements she made, which are almost entirely actually to the extent that anti-Semitism in the Labour Party has been overstated, which they treat as obviously anti-Semitic. But the key thing, which the report itself acknowledges, is that she's not an agent of the party because she's been suspended. When she makes those comments, she's not an agent of the party. The Labour Party is found guilty for the conduct of somebody who was not an agent of the party. It's a fundamental, basic error. To the extent that, and the reason why I linger on it is not just because it's used by people like Steve Reed to win their arguments, because it speaks to a fundamental, the thing that really I've been thinking about it a lot recently, is just how much our institutions have failed us in this story.
I know, I'm just keep thinking, how comes you could see that? But no one else was saying that in the press.
I mean, this is the thing that's really interesting, is I tried very hard. So, bit of background here. My professional life in South Africa has basically been bookended by 2 very substantive commissions of inquiry, right? So the big scandal I investigated when I was in my 20s was called the arms deal, which is a horrifically corrupt deal where, amongst other things, BAE Systems paid £115 million in commissions to sell South Africa sophisticated weapons which we'll never use. And there was a commission of inquiry appointed, Jacob Zuma appointed it, our former president, and he appointed a friendly judge. And it was the most horrific cover-up. And actually for 2 years, me and Andrew Feinstein couldn't go back to South Africa under threat of arrest because we refused to collaborate with it. And insiders of the commission were saying, pretty plainly that this commission is designed to go after people like Paul Holden and Andrew Feinstein. But once the commission produced its final report, and we challenged it legally, and it's actually one of the only cases in the Commonwealth where we have successfully overturned the findings of the Commission of Inquiry, right, at the High Court, held up by the Supreme Court and others. What that process did was it let me learn at a very first-hand level, what does it look like when a Commission of Inquiry doesn't work? How do I know a Commission of Inquiry isn't functioning? And what other things you can pull up? Now, when I read the EHRC report, this is exactly what I've seen in South Africa, the way they are torturing the evidence to come to this conclusion. And I was repeatedly reaching out to the media. I remember actually texting like a pretty well-known journalist here saying, these are fundamental errors here. Not a single person would publish it. Even on the left. I went to left-wing publications saying, I wrote an article setting out all the publishers that not a single place would publish it.
They were scared. Yeah.
Everyone was terrified of the idea. I remember speaking to this one very high-profile journalist, and he said, we can't question this report. It's akin to the finding of a court judgment. I'm like, well, first of all, that's ridiculous. Of course you can question a court's judgment if it's stupid and it makes errors. But second of all, this is insane. I'm telling you basic, fundamental institutional errors that you're not picking them up. And this happens again and again and again and again. And, if the Electoral Commission had done its job back in 2020 and actually investigated Labour Together and find out what was happening, we'd have a very different country right now, right? If the EHRC had done its job, we'd have a very different country right now. Fundamentally, if the BBC had done its job,
Well, yeah.
around things like, I was contacting BBC journalists saying, please report the freebies story, and they refused, right? There's real deep institutional failures here, all pushing in the same direction, which then brings me to the last question, if I may.
Yes, I'm gonna. But people
Very
do want to
quickly.
ask more
Yeah.
questions, so yeah.
What they
The
would
mic. What is that noise? Someone got. Oh, sorry. Should we turn it off?
Yeah.
They're listening in.
Oh, this mic says APCO on it. What? I think the thing that's very interesting is these. Oh, no, I think it might be the.
Yeah.
I could just project if that
Yeah,
works.
maybe
Okay.
you just project the last. Yeah.
I'll say. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll project and speak slowly because I'm told I speak too fast. The thing to bear in mind is that these people aren't unique geniuses. They're not brilliant. Morgan McSweeney is not some sophisticate who knows how to totally transform our politics in the teeth of opposition. They were pushing at an open door. As Matt Sabkazan says, these are people who are playing politics on easy mode. So when they're running a campaign to elect Jeremy Corbyn, it's easy because the establishment wanted to help them do it.
And they can do things like lose their phone and no one really pushes back. I mean,
exactly. But also what it means, the irony is that it makes them vulnerable because they've never been scrutinized. And under the most minimal amount of scrutiny, they fall apart. And that's the space where other politics can emerge.
but I also think that so many people now feel it. Obviously, they don't have your investigative journalist skills, and people can just feel it that it's not right, that they're not for us. And I think that, you know, as I knock on doors and talk to everyday people, like that gives me so much hope that people understand actually fundamentally what is happening. Okay, I'm going to take 3 more questions. Okay, I'm going to do this side. Oh, we can't do any mics, so you're going to have to shout. We'll start here, and then we'll have Monica, and then we'll have a couple at the young person, and then Sherry. Let's just do this side, yeah. If you could be quick and keep it short, just because of the time, yeah.
Sorry, I'll keep my question. I'll keep my answer shorter next time.
Yeah. Is that working? Yeah. Try.
No, it's not doing anything.
Okay.
I can just shout.
All right.
That's fine. Thanks, Paul. Like Helen, I just feel really re-traumatised.
Yeah, sorry.
By all of this.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm thinking back to the Labour files.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and my question is, why haven't there been and aren't there any consequences? Legal consequences, breaching GDPR,
Yeah.
racism. I mean, it's just outrageous catalogue. And they just resign. We've got Morgan McSweeney in front of the Select Committee tomorrow. Why can't any of these people? Simons is still an MP.
Oh yeah, he'll try and come back as well.
I'm just re-triggered as well because as we were talking, something you said reminded me of Angela Smith, Funny Tinge, and I just did a quick Google. She's rejoined the Labour Party. These people don't go away.
So my question is, why was it the Labour Party that was the vehicle for this? Why didn't they pick on a different party? Because they could have, if that's their values. And then following on from that, is this something that progressive movements are always going to be victim to? I mean, are we living in this, like, are we going to carry on living in this era of a short, like the media always has a short memory and all the things that you've uncovered and exposed will just be forgotten, and then the same playbook will be used on other progressive movements that are now emerging? Is that a real fear that we need to think about?
I do worry about the Green Party. The day that Hannah won in Manchester, and I did Newsnight, like I got so triggered remembering what it was like to do press just after the 2017 election, just how hard they and I'm not even a Green Party member. They came down so hard on me. I really worry that that it can repeat itself. There was some more questions at the back. There was this young guy, glasses.
Hi, thank you both for a great talk. I wondered, Paul, if you'd just speak a little bit more about that. Was it 260 MPs that had been like personally vetted and selected by this sort of McSweeney-Mandelson partnership, and just kind of speak a bit to how kind of deep that goes? Are there 260 loyalist MPs that were kind of always going to be voting for these interests? And that's just a shocking number. It's over a third of the Commons, isn't it? And it's just, I wonder if you speak a bit more to that. Thank you.
Just from my experience. Go along with what? Yeah. Oh, sorry, that one does work. Sorry. We'll go along. I'm sorry, actually, Sherry, do you want to? Can't say no to Sherry. Do you want to shout it out? Sorry, no, I don't want to have to walk all the way. Alistair, go on. Sorry. Yeah, sorry, I did.
This is probably a nice way to finish it, actually, because I wanted to say, firstly, thank you very much for what you do. It's so important. to bring these kind of things to light, because the average person would never know really if people like you didn't report it. So I just want to know, where do you go from here? What's your next investigation? Because there's so much more that needs to be disclosed, and so much more that, you know, so many more people that need to be outed. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll try and be as brief as I can. I mean, you're right, there are no consequences so far. I mean, I can't give away everything just yet, but this is the beginning. So me and Andrew take a different approach to our work than a lot of other investigative journalists. A lot of investigative journalists will say, fine, I've published this material. If institutions pick it up and run with it, great. If they don't, they don't. We don't think that's a good theory of change. We persist. We bring it to the attention of authorities. And if authorities don't do things, we do it ourselves. So the second phase, and to answer the question at the back, one of the things that we're doing, what I've been doing sort of quietly behind the scenes, like I've done with all my other work, is that I'm making sure that all of these people are going to be held accountable. And in the first instance, I'm giving the information that I have to the appropriate authorities and regulators to try and force investigations. And if they don't do their job, I'll do their job for them. Now, I've just written a piece for The Nerve, which should be coming out the next couple of days, and I'm sort of trying to think about how to end it. And I was talking about this issue. It's why it's been so live in my head, is these institutional failures and why there's no consequences. But there is a deep fundamental consequence here. This project is failing. The thing that really matters, the thing that actually achieves accountability here, is when voters know about what's happening and they vote against them. So maybe they don't go to jail, maybe they don't get investigated like they should, maybe the independent advisor on ethics doesn't properly investigate. In the next election, half of them are gone. Maybe more than half of them are gone. And they're not just gone, they're gone being associated with a political project that will go down as one of the most problematic, unpleasant, unpopular political projects in the history of the Labour Party and the history of this country. So there is a deep level of accountability that is already happening. Right? I think it's already happening. We're going to see it in May. The polling is really pretty clear. The Labour Party is going to lose an astonishing number of seats. So there is a degree of accountability there. I think it's something we have to hold on to. There's a bigger story here, right? Why the Labour Party? That's a really interesting question. I mean, the simple answer, and what's the phrase? I'm going to totally butcher it, but the line of class struggle in Britain used to run through the Labour Party, right? Because the Tory Party was never a vehicle for progressive change. It's totally safe for capital. It's totally safe for the establishment. It's totally safe for the military. It's totally safe for the status quo. The only place where you had a fundamental challenge to those systems was in the Labour Party. And that's why the battle for the soul of the Labour Party is really about the battle for the soul of what can change in this country. Because if you can neuter the Labour Party, if you can take it under control, you basically, for a long period of time, because of first past the process and all sorts of things, you eradicated the possibility of progressive change. Right. The second thing is that the Labour Party, by the time McSweeney had taken it over, was just utterly dysfunctional. Dysfunctional in so many different ways. The political culture was rotten, really, really rotten. But also the way it'd been sort of built and instituted and conceptualized and put together was a party that was entirely ripe for capture. Because the thing that's really interesting about the Labour Party is that it's highly top-down. You can vote whatever policy you want to conference. It doesn't matter. The members can choose a policy, it doesn't matter. Because the leadership can choose a different policy. And actually we saw this for a decade, for more than a decade. The Labour Party membership repeatedly passed motions calling for arms embargoes on Israel and for sanctions on Israel. And every single time there was a vote, certainly under Starmer, the leadership would immediately say, we're not doing that. Now, what's the point of democracy in a political party if a leader can basically just say, well, the members don't matter at all. Then they have a massively overpowered bureaucracy, which they can manipulate to their advantage, which is what they do. So when people ask this question, like what should progressive movements do? Well, first of all, I think we're in a unique position because we're lucky in the sense that we have some receipts. We know what's happened before. We can see it coming. We can see this playbook. It's not like Steve Reed is a brilliant, sophisticated political strategist. We can see him coming. We know what he's going to do. We can respond appropriately. We can call him out. We can say, you're not the right person to be making, allegations about anti-Semitism because you routinely make promiscuous allegations, including against left-wing Jewish people, right? But we have to learn from it. The new movements that are created have to embed at a fundamental level member-led democracy, right? And the second thing you have to do is raise money from your politics. The Greens, the Independents, whatever movement that you join, one of the most important things is that there should be a total standard limit on the amount of money that individual donors can donate to a political party. This is not unique. This is something that's not a radical idea. Transparency International, pretty much every Spotlight on Corruption, pretty much every single mainstream transparency and anti-governance and pro-governance organization in this country says the way political donations work in this country is a nightmare. The current Labour Party is effectively bankrolled by 10 people.
Didn't they get like what was
£4 million
donation?
from Quadrature, registered in the Cayman Islands, right? Not even declared during the election, right? Now, if you do those two things, it's not like a total solution. There's always going to be political battles. There's always going to be a media currency. There's always going to be difficult conversations to have, difficult battles to have. But if you embed a member-led democracy in a party or a movement that specifically forswears large money and donors, those two things will make you already fundamentally different from the Labour Party and what's preceded it.
200 MPs.
260 MPs.
Yeah.
It is an astonishing number, right? 260 MPs. And the thing that's really interesting about these 260 MPs is they're almost, to a person, totally uncharismatic.
Oh my God. I had to go to meetings with them. I went to one meeting. It was so boring and they were so awful that every time afterwards there was a meeting, I blamed being pregnant or not being able to go. Genuinely. Like it was, they have no values, no politics. And one of the times that they perked up the most on the WhatsApp group, actually, there was two times that really stood out for me. One, arguing against VAT on private school fees, because these people are not really Labour, right? And secondly, around Palestine. And specifically, I said to them, I put up this statement from a mosque where Starmer had gone in after he said that statement on LBC, saying that Israel has the right to turn off water and electricity. And they'd gone into a mosque and they'd taken all these pictures and they were obviously using it as PR. And the mosque put out this statement saying, this is not what happened. Yeah. And this was a really robust discussion. And, this is really like the Labour Party has given the wrong impression of what this meeting was. And I put it on the WhatsApp group for the candidates and said, this is really bad. Like the mosque shouldn't have to do this. And the amount of people that replied saying, no, this makes the mosque look bad.
Jesus.
People said things like that and people were liking those. I've got pictures of every single person that liked that. I started an Excel spreadsheet. And genuinely, we were in meetings about just after Sam had made that statement, and it was me and one other person there was more than 100 candidates on that poll that spoke out and said anything. And the rest of them, they were there ready either to stay silent or they were there ready to say, oh, you're doing a great job, David Lammy. And, that's the reality of these people. But a lot of them will lose their seats the way it's going.
I think it's interesting is on the one hand, it's both the strength and the weakness of this political movement. Because on the one hand, they can guarantee, tomorrow there's going to be a vote on whether Starmer should be referred to the Privileges Committee. I'm pretty sure There's 260 MPs which is coming are going to vote.
Yeah.
But at the same time, these people aren't embedded in their communities.
Oh no. Oh my God. Okay, one of the things, sorry, this is even like, one of the things that happened is that
Sing it, sister.
they told me that, they gave me for a very short period an organizer, and they took them away because they stopped all financial resources to this seat for me when I was like 7 months pregnant. But they said, the trainer, the organizer they gave me, they said, oh, I went to training and all the organisers were asking advice on how to make their candidates speak to people better. Like, their candidates were incapable of having a conversation on the doorstep. So they were training the organisers so the organisers could go back and train the candidates so that they could talk. I mean, it's like the level of which these people didn't care about their communities, were not rooted in them, didn't even want to talk to people, actually were incapable of being able to have a conversation with a normal person. It was mind-blowing.
Did anybody see, by the way, it's one of my personal favourite videos on the whole internet, which is the Luke Akehurst campaign video in 2024. Yeah. And I was like, this is the man who is going to have to go to his constituents who are desperately unhappy with the Labour Party and get them to support him. It's like, this is not going to happen. This like deeply uncharismatic man who nobody knows and nobody likes if they get to know him is going to have to try and win back the Labour Party. And this is the weakness, right? This is what's being shown at a local level. This is why their vote is going to collapse. It's because it's not just that Starmer's unpopular. It's not just which of course he plainly is incredibly unpopular, and this political project is unpopular. You can survive that as a political movement and as a party if you have constituency MPs who are popular. If you have constituency MPs who've been for a long period of time building a community and explaining, you know what, I'm different than the leadership. I don't embody those values. I'm going to do something different. But you don't have that. You have candidates who have the most fleeting connections to their constituencies, build no relationships whatever. They can't turn out anybody to come and door knock for them. That's the other thing that's going to be really problematic for the Labour Party. They're going to lose between 1,000 and 1,500 councillors at this local election. Those are the only people who are door knocking at the moment. Yeah. This is their entire base. So on the one hand, they can get nasty stuff through Parliament. They can get through jury trial stuff. On the other hand, they've eviscerated their ground game through this process. Because, I broke a story with the Times a few months ago. The membership is now 260,000. I think it's going to go below 200,000 this year, right? Nobody is door knocking. There's nobody who wants to go and campaign for this stuff. There's councillors who are going to lose their jobs. And then you have, on top of that, MPs who have no connection to their constituency, who nobody likes. This is a disaster for this political project. Also, a great opportunity for well-liked, charismatic, local, independent candidates who you should all vote for.
All right. Okay. All right, I'm just looking at your notes to make sure we covered everything. But yeah, we have definitely run out of time. And it was such a pleasure. Paul, thank you so much for your courage and your bravery. And absolutely what Sherry said, like, you do us all a huge service. And we are so lucky to have you in this country. And just to say, I know it's like triggering to go through this for lots of us. And Paul asked me to do a talk to come on the panel for his book launch. And I was like, I don't know, Paul, I don't know if I can. I just want to think about it and how horrible these people were. And then Andrew, who used to be he looked after me a lot when I worked for the unions, and he texted me and said, I just want to say that Paul's my son-in-law. And,
Oh, nepotism.
I know, and I was like, I can't say no to Andrew because he's such a big person, an important person to me. But and I did it when it's so important. It is hard, but there are lessons we can take from it. And I just want to say to each of you that feels that anger of what happened, please put that anger into your political activism. Keep coming here, keep bringing other people. Do not fall back into some blind, hope about what the Labour Party is now. We really do need to make change happen. And just to say again, please talk to Norma about coming door knocking. I'm going to be there as much as possible. South Chingford, which is where I grew up. Election day next Thursday to get the vote out. It's going to be really big, and just just on that point of triggering, you know, just a reminder, I was just talking to Sherry, a reminder of like what happened with me, and just to thank you again for having my back.
Yeah.
Like that day, and like me and Helen and others were just like, what is happening? And we obviously didn't know, and then I was in the car to Newsnight, and I knew I had to go out and defend myself that night, even though I was like in bits and, you know, breastfeeding the rest of it, because I knew when I woke up the next day, if I hadn't gone out to defend myself, they would have made me into an anti-Semite and I would never be able to get a good job again. I genuinely thought, if I don't go now and defend myself, and Helen was there, and, you know, it was just like horrifying. But the fact that you guys backed me, and, you know, the professors I worked with at LSE wrote a letter to the Guardian, like that is what meant that I was saved. And I cannot ever thank you enough for supporting me in that moment, and still being here today. And honestly, and I say this every meeting, but sometimes when I'm going into those media rooms, and like this month, you would have seen a couple of weeks ago with Palantir's like UK boss, Mosley, I like use you guys to like conjure up the strength. And I just think who you're here representing and who's got your back, and it's such a powerful thing. So always thank you from me, and we keep going, and it's amazing we're still here. They haven't got rid of any of us, so we get stronger. So we'll be back next month. We're just organising around May bank holidays, and we will be reflecting on the local election results with hopefully newly elected councillors, Independent and the Greens, and hopefully a special guest as well. But yeah, just keep in touch on Instagram or email, however you do it. Yeah, and just speak to Helen or Norma or anyone at the back to help and support. Thank you again. Have a great week and a great month. Bye.